Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be playing with my version of Doll Stall. This is going to be a more budget build because unless you have like $1,000 to invest into tropical beaches, this is a version that you can play that in its own way gives a new spin on the deck in Expanded, where it has its own perks that you can't always necessarily get with having Tropical Beach. So let's talk about it. If you don't know what Doll Stall is, it's basically a deck that uses the Doll and Robo Substitute item cards that when they're in play, you can treat them as basic Pokemon, and if your opponent knocks them out, they don't take any prize cards. So we do play 4 of both of them, so that's 8 quote-unquote Pokemon our opponent has to knock out that they won't get a prize off of. And we're also playing a lot of utility Pokemon for different situations, and we do play Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer, things like that to just disrupt our opponent's energy. So we'll talk about all that in a second, but let's get to the actual Pokemon in our list. We'll start with Bunnelby. So Bunnelby has a cool little ability up here. This is one of the ancient traits. It's Barrage. This Pokemon may attack twice a turn, and which is really cool because the 2 attacks, one of them discards the top card of your opponent's deck so we can mill, and the other one shuffles a card from our discard pile back into our deck. So with Barrage, we can use each attack once, we can use Burrow twice or Rototiller twice. Really strong utility card. We're playing 1 copy of Snorlax for the block ability. When this Pokemon is in the active spot, our opponent's Pokemon cannot retreat. So unless they have Guzma or they have Switch, we can sometimes lock one of our opponent's Pokemon into the active. And then if we're able to, use energy denial cards, we can keep energy off of the Pokemon and they may not be able to attack, so that will buy us a couple turns. We're playing 2 copies of Hoopa with the Scoundrel Guard ability. Prevent all effects of attacks including damage done to this Pokemon by your Pokemon's GX or Pokemon EX. So if we're going up against a deck that only has attackers that are Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX, Hoopa can literally auto-win us the game. We're playing 2 copies of Sableye for Junk Hunt. Put 2 item cards from your discard pile into your hand so we can get our dolls back, we can get some of our utility hammers, whatever we need that's an item card. Versus Seeker especially, we can add those back to our hand with Junk Hunt. And we are playing Pyroar. So this is a really cool card. The ability is Intimidating Mane. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon. So if you go up against like ADP Zacian and Expanded, unless they play a stage 1, you basically automatically win the game as soon as you get Pyroar out. We also are playing 2 of the Litleo Wild Dash. If your opponent has a Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX in play, it has no retreat cost. So even if we start with this Pokemon, if our opponent drops it to Dedenne or they already have a EX or GX out, we can retreat into, placing a doll in the active. So our pseudo Tropical Beach is going to be the new Zacian V. We're going to use Intrepid Sword every turn unless we play a supporter like Steven's Resolve that ends our turn automatically or we attack. So Intrepid Sword allows us to draw an additional 3 cards at the end of our turn, and if we have more than 7 cards, hey, we can still use it. With Tropical Beach, you draw until you have 7 cards, but with this we can have 20, 30 cards in our hand and we can still use it. So very strong ability. We do play 3 copies because we do want to see it during our first turn, especially if we go first. So we play 3. And we're finishing off our Pokemon lineup with a Girafarig for the Get Lost. For a Colorless Energy, we put 2 cards from our opponent's discard pile into the Lost Zone so we can hit their supporters like their Guzma or Energy, things like that. Just extra utility from Get Lost with that. So going into our item cards, we are playing Computer Search as our aspect of choice, just to find any missing pieces that we need just to get set up. We're playing 2 Counter Catchers, so we can only play this card if we have more prize cards remain than our opponent, since we're not necessarily going to be taking knockouts. As soon as our opponent takes a prize card. This is going to allow us to switch one of our opponent's bench Pokemon with their active, so we can get something locked in the active that doesn't have energy. It can combo off pretty good with like Snorlax and stuff like that. So we are playing 2 Crushing Hammer for energy discard, 1 Enhanced Hammer. There's a lot of special energy decks running around, so just I wanted to include 1 so that way, you know, we don't have to necessarily use a supporter to get rid of the energy. And also 2, we can recycle it with Sableye, so 1 copy is fine. And then going into our dolls, like I said, we do play 4 copies of Lily's Pokédoll. This Pokemon, I'll just read the text for you. Play this card as if it were a 30 HP basic Pokemon. At any time during your turn, if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, you may discard all cards from it and put it on the bottom of your deck. This card can't retreat. If it is knocked out, your opponent can't take any prize cards from it. So I'll talk about a Robo Substitute. Basically the same thing, except it can't retreat as well. And you can discard it from play at any time, but unlike Lily's Pokédoll, you cannot put it on the bottom of your deck. So do keep that in mind. Otherwise, they're basically the same card. So we are playing 4 copies of Nest Ball. This is just to find our Zacian Vs or any utility Pokemon we need. This is a utility deck and it changes from game to game. So it's if you do play a deck like this, it's really important that you know the meta, that you know what most of the cards do, so you know how to go about playing your opponent. We are playing 1 switch, and we're playing 4 Trick Shovel with this list. Trick Shovel is going to allow us to look at the top card of either player's deck, and then we can discard that card or return to the top of the deck. So while not necessarily being a mill deck, Trick Shovel is going to open up a lot of different combos for us to either lock our opponent for a turn if we want to leave a card on top if they're not doing anything, or to just do a little extra milling. And we can also use it on our turn for ourselves, just to, if we get a little bit stuck, possibly we can hit a supporter into the discard if we have Versus Seeker and so on. So we play 4 copies of that, and we play 4 Versus Seeker. Our supporters are extremely important in this deck, and just being able to see them, we want to have Versus Seeker at the ready. We can also get it back with Sableye, so we can basically have infinite Versus Seekers, therefore infinite supporters, as long as we can use Sableye or Bunnelby. Bunnelby, though, shuffles it back into our deck, so keep that in mind. We are playing 1 copy of Bellaba and Bryceman. I probably said that right. Bryceman? Yeah. Just for the top effect. Just discard 3 cards from the top of each player's deck. This just gives us the mill aspect of the deck. Just if our opponent is trying to stall us out, or we're just trying to end the game a little bit quicker, we can just start milling them. We'll be able to put cards back into our deck with Sableye and Bunnelby, so we're not necessarily upset about discarding from the top of our deck, especially once we get set up and we have all the cards that we want in our hand already. We are playing 1 Faba. Faba is going to allow us to put a Pokemon Tool or Special Energy or any Stadium card in play into the lot zone. So this is going to allow us to just take care of any problem card that it can take care of specifically and just take it out of the game. We are playing 2 Gladion. This is going to allow us to look at our prize cards and swap one of those cards with Gladion, since we aren't necessarily taking prizes. I did build this list, as you'll see, with the energy to where if we need to attack for damage, we can. But otherwise, Gladion will help us find any pieces that we have that are prized. We're playing 1 Guzma, 1 Plumeria. This is just going to allow us to guarantee a hit on an energy, like on our opponent's bench, at the cost of discarding 2 cards. We're playing 1 Pokemon Ranger. Because we have so many item cards in our deck that are important to us, you know, Quaking Punch or Noivern GX, anything that item locks us from an attack can be very problematic, and also being able to take Altered Creation GX out of the picture is good. So we do run 1 Pokemon Ranger just for those situations. We're playing 4 Steven's Resolve. Search your deck for up to 3 cards and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck and your turn ends. Once we're done setting up with Zacian V or we need to find cards as soon as we can play a supporter, Steven's Resolve can help set our board state up. So we do play 4 copies of that. We're also playing 1 Team Flare Grunt for the energy discard. 2 Teammates. This is an amazing card for this deck. When one of our Pokemon is knocked out, we can search our deck for 2 cards and put them into our hand. So that does include the dolls. Keep that in mind because they are considered quote-unquote Pokemon when they are in play. Going into our energy, we are playing 3 Blend Energy of the Grass, Fire, Psychic, and Dark. This is going to allow us to attack with Pyroar and Hoopa and Sableye. And, you know, sometimes if your opponent doesn't automatically scoop with Zacian V, ADP, we can actually start attacking with Scorching Fang. So that does open some options there. We are playing 1 Double Colorless Energy for Hoopa. There are times where, you know, you may want to use Super Psybolt. This keeps us from having to attach for 3 turns before we can attack. And also the Double Colorless Energy makes it where we use Scorching Fang on our second energy attachment, and we can also use it. I have used Mind Shock before, so we do play 1 since we are able to use it on a lot of different Pokemon in our list. And we're playing 1 basic Dark Energy just to avoid Enhanced Hammer and whatnot. So this is the list. We are going to hop into a game or 2, and I'm going to showcase my version of a budget expanded Doll Stall deck. So let's get to it. So one of the shortcomings of this specific build is, like with Zacian, you know, decks that play Silent Lab, it can get rough since that takes away our ability. But that's why we play Chaotic Swell. So Chaotic Swell kind of gives us an out to that. Usually Zacian, you only need to use it for a turn or 2. Give us time to set up. So it looks like our opponent is playing Chaotic Swell. The thing with any kind of stall deck is once you can stabilize your board state, we're usually good to go. But anybody that plays decks like this knows that when your opponent is accelerating more energy than you can handle, sometimes they just overrun you. Fire decks are really good at that. Turbo Dark can, depending on how much energy they can get into play and continually chain, you know. Decks that can recur a lot of energy too are good against Stall. So our opponent is pretty much almost set up completely. Main thing for us is going to be setting up a Pyroar, assuming we have one available to us. Alright, so we got Litleo. Alright, so Pyroar is in there. Gonna be honest, guys. We don't know what our opponent's playing yet, but we are going to go get double Litleo and not take any chances. Yep. Our opponent already knows as soon as we get a Pyroar, the game is over. And that's what I had mentioned in the intro. So going against Zacian decks, if they don't play stage 1 and we get Pyroar out, we win. And if they had knocked out that Zacian V, we would have teammates in that Pyroar, and that would have been it. One of the funny things about playing against Ultra Necrozma is we have a good matchup because we're able to hit their energy, but at the same time, if they are able to basically get like, I don't know, it's weird, like Silent Lab can shut us down. We can get Pyroar into play, but if they have Trubbish, you know, it can be problematic. So we'll still go get a Litleo. We will Trick Shovel our opponent. See what they're working with. Yeah, we'll hit the energy. We're going Steven's Resolve, since we can play Supporter, and we will go get we will go get a Doll and Pyroar. So buy us a little bit of time until our opponent sets up their other stuff. Our opponent hasn't dropped a Trubbish yet, so. Big thing when you go up against Ultra Necrozma is counting their Guzmas, their Versus Seekers. Okay. So we will play a Doll, evolve into Pyroar. And then we will Steven's Resolve again. So I believe what we are going to want is an Enhanced Hammer, a Counter Catcher, and, well, now we'll let's see, Counter Catcher. Let's go Chaotic Swell, and we'll go another Stevens. Because they aren't going to be able to knock out this Zacian yet. At this point, we're just trying to stabilize. Oh, that's game. I don't know why our opponent did that. That is game. Don't know if our opponent realizes what Pyroar does. But we'll see. We will. We'll Plumeria. And then we'll Intrepid Sword. Try and get some utility out of this Zacian before it's knocked out. But once Pyroar comes to the active, guys, that's actually going to be game. The interesting thing about this specific deck is, like, once it gets set up using Steven's Resolve and Intrepid Sword, we're usually good to go. And a lot of decks in the format aren't necessarily prepared for a deck like Dollstall. A lot of decks are regionals. They just hope to avoid the Dollstalls as long as they can. Obviously, this deck has a very rough matchup against like Vileplume. We're going to Gladion. Get a Trick Shovel. And we will pass the turn back to our opponent. Like I said, the game is actually over. Like, there's nothing else they can do. So we are going to Steven's Resolve for a Versus Seeker, and we're just going to try and just deck them out. There's no reason for us to do anything else. And let's say we didn't have Pyroar and our opponent had to attack. I mean, you can just see right here, they would have to knock out every single one of these dolls to win the game. So that's 5 additional turns this deck would have. I guess our opponent's probably going to end up playing in or something. Guzma, okay. Sure. That is fine. We'll Faba the energy away and then pass it back to our opponent. We could also, if the matchup is going a little bit differently, you know, we have cards like Bunnelby here to get cards back. And when I was test playing this deck, I mean, the win streak I have here is just from test playing this deck, just trying to get a list down that was, 1, consistent, but 2, also competitive. And Zacian V is a very, very good card for this deck. And standard for the stall decks that play it, it's very good. It's a very creative, you know, inclusion into like Cinccino Mill and stuff. And so taking that same concept into expanded has worked out quite well. One thing that's been interesting too is, I'll say this, is Sableye hasn't been as relevant as Bunnelby. I mean, I use Sableye occasionally, but Bunnelby has been a lot better, so. Good game, good game. Yeah, Pyroar is great in this deck. Alright, everyone, one more time, here's the list. I just kind of wanted to showcase the general setup and the idea of the deck, and we got to see how effective it can be against your more meta competitive decks like ADP Zacian and Ultra Necrozma. Pyroar is a great inclusion into this deck with Intimidating Mane. You could argue to run 2 copies of Pyroar, just since we have no way of really searching it out outside of drawing into it or using Steven's Resolve or Teammates, which could be fine. You know, you got computer search, but it can auto win some matchups, and that's the thing that we want to see with a deck like this. We do play so many different cards in here that can offer us auto wins, and it is a fun deck. You know, this is one of those decks where if you do play it and you want to play it in a competitive setting, you know, really study up on not just the meta trends, but what most of the cards do you know, in the game. And that could be a lot of fun, doing a lot of research for stuff like that. Zacian V, you know, if you don't have tropical beaches, but you have some Zacians lying around, or you were thinking about investing in Zacians, you know, this does offer you another deck to play in Expanded that isn't necessarily like Zacian V as an attacker. So really cool inclusion in this deck. It does offer the flexibility of not doing what Tropical Beach does, in that you can only draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. You know, once you are over that mark, you know, we can still use Intrepid Sword. So it does offer that flexibility there. And the dolls, you know, they can get very annoying for our opponents. So especially when you're able to recycle them with Sableye, Bunnelby, and Hoopa. Hoopa we run as a 2 copy. I was testing it with 1, but a lot of times you want to have 2, especially if you prize it. Sometimes you don't want to waste your Gladion on getting a Pokemon. You much rather get like a supporter or a missing piece otherwise. So it may not be a waste, but running 2 copies, one of the weaknesses of this deck is if we go first and we only have 1 Pokemon, no dolls, our opponent can actually just, you know, one-shot us when we have 1 Pokemon in play and we lose. So that's something we try to avoid. So playing an extra Hoopa or just another Pokemon, you know, does help with that. You'll also notice I am not playing the Regirock promo. Apparently online it's like worth a lot and I was unable to get one. You could put the Regirock promo in here, the one that has the, I believe it's the barrier ability. I cannot remember. It's the ancient trait, but you could run that and substitute one of these cards out. This list runs fine without it, but in real life, if you want, you know, pay $2 or you have 1 lying around, you could throw it in somewhere. So if you guys think this list is cool, you know, smash that like button, especially if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more future content. I love playing Expanded, and I really am looking forward to the future sets that are coming out. So hopefully we will be able to continue to push out cool, fun, competitive decks. This has been a fun little deck to work around and figure out all the little kinks, and it's been a nice little adventure. And I actually ended up going online and buying most of these cards in real life. I had some lying around, but I just went ahead and got me some Zacians for that, and you know, you can use them in standard. But anyways guys, I appreciate you. Stay healthy out there, take your vitamins, and I will see you next time.